police are bracing for more violent disorder this weekend as far-right protesters are planning at least 15 rallies across the country.
Well, it follows violence in Southport, Manchester, Hartlepool and London after 3 girls were killed in a mass stabbing in Southport. The Prime Minister has now announced a new policing unit to crack down on thugs who threaten a summer of riots.
Well, we can speak...
These thugs are mobile. They move from community to community. And we must have a policing response that can do the same. Shared intelligence, wider deployment of facial recognition technology, and preventative action, criminal behaviour orders to restrict their movements before they can even board a train, in just the same way that we do with football hooligans.
Now we can speak to the Metro Mayor for Liverpool City Region, that's Steve Rotherham, where protests are planned this weekend, and former head of counter-terror policing, Neil Basu. Steve Rotherham, I'm going to come to you first. You know, at the centre of this, I'm sure the whole country and everybody would agree, should be the victims here. Let's just name them: young BB, Elsie Dot and Alice. And your job should be rebuilding and healing that community. Instead, you're dealing with what's been described, well, fairly as thugs. Just help us with how that feels in terms of the job you're doing.
Well, we will rebuild, and those people who came in for one night of violence and then went elsewhere, they are not welcome back into that area, because the community wants to pull together. It does want to heal. It wants some time to let the dust settle. It wants to make sense, if anybody can, of what has happened. And those unwelcome sights of people on the streets who were breaking down walls, who were throwing missiles at the police, you know, they're things that never need to be repeated into this area. And by the way, it's not just the likes of me who is saying this. You know, one of the bereaved parents of one of the young girls, little girls, has said that these people don't represent them or their views.
And we know that extra powers have been put in place there in Southport, haven't they? A Section 60 order which gives police greater stop and search powers. There's an extra police presence to try to calm the community there. How does it feel at the moment when it comes to that sort of level of tensions? And, you know, have you seen out and about the difference that having these extra powers and police have made?
Well, even before this, the people, they voluntarily gave up their time to clean the streets the morning after that disorder. You know, they were repairing the damage. I actually watched some people rebuilding the walls that had been demolished, one around the mosque. You know, they were demolished to make ammunition to throw against the very people who'd been the ones who were responding to that awful and heinous act. And they came under attack from people purportedly and sometimes excused by these sorts of online people, these people who whip up the emotions of something like that to go and to support the families. Well, they don't support the families. They don't represent the families. They don't represent the views of the people in Southport. You know, this is groups who are intent on disorder, and the Prime Minister is absolutely right that we need to do more, don't we, to ensure that we share intelligence and try and stop these people. There's some of the same faces, by the way, from Southport were on our screens the next night at the Cenotaph and in Whitehall. So we need to do more to stop these people from whipping up that sort of hysteria.
Well, we have Neil Basu here, who's the ex-head of counter-terrorism policy. You've heard what's been said there by Steve Rotherham. There's a policy that's been announced where Keir Starmer has said there's going to be one police unit, in effect, to keep it simple, to deal with this. Is that really enough?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me on. I mean, I agree with everything the Mayor has just said and with how you opened this. You know, I, with the greatest of respect, do not want to be on your show talking about this subject today. We should be talking about 13 bereaved and traumatised families and how to rebuild the support that's required in a traumatised community, not talking about hooligans, thugs, base criminals who have hijacked that story. What I saw yesterday from Keir Starmer was exactly the right thing for a Prime Minister to be doing, which was to call in the most senior chiefs in the country to discuss how they respond to what could be a long, hot summer. And those chiefs in the room, I know them all personally. There are some of the finest chiefs of their generation in that room, heads of public order, National Lead for Counter-Terrorism, my previous job, the National Lead for Operations in Organised Crime, and some of the most impressive regional chiefs we have in the country. They know how to do this. In that room is Dame Lynn Owens. She will excuse me for describing her as a veteran, but she was a veteran of the August riots when she was last in London policing. They understand how to mobilise. I ran a piece of London at that time in 2011, and within 2 days I had officers from South Yorkshire and Wales on the streets of London helping Metropolitan Police officers. Within 4 days, we'd mobilised 16,000 officers. Now, we are better equipped to do that these days because National Police Chiefs Council, and this is what the Prime Minister is referring to, has an operations centre, has a National Public Order Intelligence Unit, and has the capability of responding to events anywhere in the country by mutual aid between police forces.
Neil Basu, can I just stop you in this? Sorry, because I wish we had more time to discuss this in greater depth, but you should know what, and no doubt you will have heard what Nigel Farage had to say. Law and order, folks on our streets is breaking down. The Prime Minister hasn't got an earthly clue how to deal with it. We need to start getting tough. Now, you just described the professionalism of the approach of people in that room, their background and their experience. What would you have to say to Nigel Farage?
You haven't got a long enough programme for what I'd like to say to Nigel Farage. So that is a far-right politician, once again, trying to direct policing and law and order. He doesn't speak for tens of millions of people. The Prime Minister does, who has to serve the whole population, not just the ones he likes. And this is not the first time a politician has tried to interfere with operational policing, particularly from that section of politics. The Prime Minister is doing the right thing because he's listening to the experts who can do this, have the infrastructure to do this, and he is going to support them by strengthening that infrastructure. We have an under-resourced, underfunded, underappreciated and overwhelmed police force. And in the medium term, we're going to have to increase that. But what we need is the support of politicians showing that they understand, appreciating the situation and trying to calm it down. And that does include putting pressure on social media companies who, in my experience, never listen to senior law enforcement, but they listen to governments, they listen to the law, and they need to play their part. And Mr Farage should think very carefully 4 days into this about the power of his words. He's one of the most skilled communicators in the country, and he should be calming this down. Nothing he said this morning calms things down, and he knows that. OK, well,
Steve, if I can just come back to you. I mean, obviously, the things that are being put in place are... Some of them are going to take time, aren't they, to come through? There are these worries about further protests, further violent disorder. How worried about this are you as to what could come next?
Well, we're always concerned, aren't we, that there could be a repeat of violence somewhere in the Liverpool City region. But we've said we're a very welcoming place. We just don't want these type of people coming to our area. And as Neil just said, the real issue for us to tackle is that whilst senior politicians like Farage should be condemning these people, he's not. He's excusing them. He's given them some legitimacy to go out and perpetrate some of these acts. I hope that there aren't further incidents. We're very much aware of them. I'm speaking to Serena Kennedy, who's the Chief Police Officer in the Liverpool City Region in the Merseyside, on a regular basis. We've got the contingencies. We know exactly what we'd need to do to ensure that these things are nipped in the bud. But that's why the Prime Minister was absolutely right in talking to the likes of chief constables to try and get their views, you know, not in some way cobbling together his own views and then foisting that on people. And that's why I think it's so important that we do something about social media, because it was social media that whipped up the lies. It wasn't just misinformation and disinformation. It was absolute lies about the perpetrator of this heinous crime in Southport. And that was the thing that fueled some of the disorder that we saw on the streets. So we need to tackle this, and it needs to be tackled at a national level.
Just wonder if you've got a message. Anybody looking at that stuff on social media who's thinking of showing up to a protest, what's your message to them, please?
Well, just have a think about what the messaging is actually saying. Read between the lines of the messaging. It's not in any way to go and support families who are bereaved. It is about to stir up racial tensions. It's about trying to break down law and order. And, you know, people like Farage are doing this for their own political ends. And I know he wants to bring the toxicity of the American political system they love so much to our country. But he won't win with division and hatred. You know, we saw the response to that on the streets of Southport by the people in Southport. And he was dismissed at the ballot box, and he's being dismissed again by their acts of kindness, their acts of humanity. So the first thing to say is that he doesn't speak for the people in our area at all, and he definitely doesn't speak for the people in the Southport area. And we saw the true spirit of the people of Southport, and we will continue to see that in the days, weeks, and even years ahead.
Steve Rotherham, there's much rebuilding to be done, isn't there? Thanks very much for joining us this morning, and also Neil Basu, thank you to you as well.